Hello. Um, my name is Sami. Just going to open up with a Bible verse, and then I'm just going to go right into my story. So Isaiah 118 says, "Come now, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they shall become like wool." I was born in the early 80s. Yes, I'm 31. I was born in Kansas City to non-Christian parents. My parents were the type of people, they would say that they were Christian, but I don't remember praying, talking to God, talking about God, going to church other than at Christmas and Easter when we were growing up. My parents were both very abusive to my sister and I. My mom was really angry. She was a really angry person. She would scream at my sister and I all the time, slap us, call us worthless. She was a really big perfectionist, and when we would clean the house on every Saturday, if there was a single streak in the mirror, if there was any dirt on the floor, she would scream at us that it wasn't good enough and we were terrible daughters and needed to redo the entire thing. And my dad, on the other hand, he was also very cold, very distant, very angry. My dad's a Vietnam War vet, so he has his own PTSD going on, and his anger would come out at me and my sister, and he would call us fat or mud eyes or things like that. So growing up, I really never felt loved or desired as a daughter. I didn't really have a lot of friends growing up. I was extremely studious and socially awkward. I was teased and bullied a lot. I would wear like high water jeans to school every day, like with a big old turtleneck, giant glasses, overbite, stringy hair, things like that. And so I got made fun of all the time. And I was actually the kid that got in trouble for reading too much when I was at school. Parent-teacher conferences were called because I would have the book hiding underneath the desk and not be paying attention. So that's kind of who I was in school. I didn't have a lot of friends. And so in 8th grade, my dad ended up leaving. He left my whole family. He left on a Saturday. My mom was actually at work, and I woke up to my sister shaking me next to her and just saying, "Sami, wake up, Sami, wake up, you know, Dad's leaving." And I got up and I was stunned. Like, my parents had generally ignored each other when I was growing up. Like, occasionally they'd have a big fight and we'd go and stay in some seedy motel. But I never saw my parents divorcing, and so I was really shocked when my sister told me that. And throughout the day, my dad didn't talk to us, he didn't look at us, he didn't acknowledge what was going on. He would just pack up box after box. And my sister and I just kind of stayed in our rooms. The tension was really, really strong that day. And at the end of the day, he sat us down on the bed and he told us, you know, "I want you to know, if you guys had cleaned up the house more, if you guys had gotten along more, then your mom and I would still be together. Then we would have a good marriage, and I would have stayed around and we'd still be a family. But because you guys were terrible daughters, I'm gonna go, and our marriage is over." And with that, he left, and he left us to tell our mother. And so we called my mom at work and said, "Hey, Mom, you need to come home. Dad just left." And she said, "I'll be right there," rushed home. And I remember that night she like rented videos from Blockbuster and ordered takeout and stuff like that to make us feel better. However, she never told us that it wasn't our fault. So that kind of stuff lingered with me throughout the majority of my life. After my dad left, I just decided I wanted to be accepted. And so I was determined to lose my nerd image for the sake of popularity. And so I saved up and bought contacts, cut my hair, actually started brushing my hair, got all new clothes, but that didn't change who I was on the inside. And I was still socially awkward. I was still uncomfortable around people. And so that didn't change who I was. And so I began to sink into depression because I didn't ever feel accepted by anyone. And so when I was a sophomore in high school, I met my first boyfriend, Dave. And he would write me notes, because back then we didn't have cell phones. So he would write me notes, slip it into the slat of my locker. And I remember feeling so giddy, and he would call me beautiful and give me all these compliments. And he made me feel really good about myself, which was the first time I'd ever felt good about myself. And I really fell for him really, really hard. I fell head over heels in love with him. And we began dating after he asked me out in junior year in history class. And that weekend, our first week dating, we were at a friend's house, and there was a group of us kind of sitting around in the basement, just kind of talking, listening to music. And somehow the topic of sex came up. And they were all talking about it in this really experienced way, and I was shocked. I didn't realize that people were having sex. And I turned to Dave and I was like, are you a virgin? He was like, no. And I was shocked. I was astounded. I was so embarrassed. I could not believe that I was the only virgin in that room. And I was made to feel like that was a bad thing. Like I was naive and stupid. And so I decided after that day that I was going to lose my virginity to Dave, and that we were going to be together forever, and we were so in love, and we were going to spend the rest of our lives together. So we lost our virginity together, and naturally we broke up like a year later because we were in high school. So when we broke up, I remember him telling me where I had lacked at as a girlfriend and how I'd never been good enough. And again, I felt so rejected because I had given this gift to Dave. I'd given my virginity to Dave. I'd given my heart to Dave. And it was just kind of thrown away. And after that, I remember thinking, well, what's the point anymore? Like, why am I saving my virginity? Or why am I keeping up this purity? I'm not a virgin anymore, so why not? And I kind of started to become very promiscuous after that. And I graduated high school, and I started community college. And while I was there, I was working and putting my way through college by working in a pizza place. And that's where I met Travis. Travis was Italian. He was very charming. He knew all of the right things to say at all the right times. And our relationship moved extremely fast. I fell for him very quickly, and within a month, we moved in together, and he got me an apartment. He smoked a lot of weed. He did a lot of cocaine and pills. I'd only ever experimented with weed, but he did a lot of the oh, come on, try this, baby. You know you're gonna like it. Just try this a little bit. And so fairly quickly, I became hooked on pills. And the first few months of us being together were fantastic. I had fallen madly in love with him, and soon things began to change. Travis started becoming really possessive and manipulative, and I worked as a waitress at the time, and then he would start a stopwatch from the time I had to go to work until the time it would take me to get there, and I'd have to call him as soon as I got there. and he would time how long it took me to get there, and likewise how long it would take me to get home. If I stayed late, he would call my manager and confirm that that's in fact where I was. He would check my phone records. Any phone number that he didn't recognize, he would call and confirm of who that was. And I thought this was really abnormal, but I'd never had an example of what a good relationship was. And he would always tell me, well, it's because I love you so much. I want to make sure you're okay. I want to make sure that you're being faithful to me. And so one night, I was late getting home from work, and he had been unable to get a hold of me or my manager. And when I finally called him and said, I'm on my way home, he just said in this deadpan voice, you need to get home right now. And so I walked in, and I knew I was terrified. I had a pit in my stomach. And when I walked in, he didn't say anything. He just took a step at me and drew his hand back and slapped me as hard as he could in the face. And I was stunned. I had heard about women being hit like through the movies or domestic violence things, but I never thought that that could happen to me. But immediately after, he apologized, and he's like, I'm so sorry, baby, I'll never hit you again, but you understand why I had to do that, right? You worried me so much. And so I thought that that was my fault, that I had brought on the fact that he hit me. And so in my own head, I'm like, okay, I'm never gonna make him hit me again. I'm gonna check in all the time and everything. And so that manipulation and that possession just grew more and more. A few months later, Travis threw a party at our apartment. I walked in and I looked around, and I remember thinking that it was really, really strange that I was the only girl there. I felt really awkward and uncomfortable because, again, I'm socially awkward, and that and all the men were kind of giving me the up and down kind of thing, and I felt so uncomfortable, and I remember just ducking my head down and like trying to be invisible. And Travis came up and, he kissed my cheek, and I told him how I felt, and he's like, you're gonna feel relaxed soon. Here, baby, take this. And he handed me a pill. Because I trusted him, I took it. I didn't ask what it was, but I did take it. Everything after that is a haze. I remember bits and pieces of that night. I remember my wrists being tied to our headboard. I remember being stripped down to being naked. I remember feeling really cold and trying to talk, but the words weren't coming out. I remember that I couldn't understand in my head, like, why wasn't I able to talk? I remember bits and pieces of man after man coming in and raping me. I don't know who they are or how many it was. I woke up sometime the next afternoon from being in a daze that evening. I was still naked, and I was extremely sore. My body was covered in bruises. Someone had untied my wrists, and they were red where they had been tied. And Travis walked in the room, and he asked me if I was finally awake and kind of tossed a bottle of water to me. And he could barely look at me. And he told me that I was such a slut, that I was such a whore. And I remember being flabbergasted and just apologizing and trying to tell him, like, I don't remember what happened. Do you know what happened? And begging for forgiveness. And he just kept saying what a whore I was. And I cried and apologized and begged for his forgiveness. And I felt like I had asked for that. Like, that was my fault. I took that pill. I didn't know what it was. Like, I must have done something to invite all of this. Later on, I found out down the line that he had actually set up that party, and he had been the one to drug me and charge those men to rape me. A few weeks later, I found out I had gotten pregnant that night. I was really scared to tell Travis. When I finally worked up the courage to tell him what had happened, he got so angry. He called me every name in the book. I remember him hitting me in the head and telling me how stupid I was. But in the end, he said he would take me to get an abortion. He dropped me off at the clinic, and he left me there for 9-10 hours, something like that. And when he finally came back for me, I was sitting out on the curb. I was throwing up from the medicine they had given me. He didn't talk to me. He wouldn't really look at me. But for the next couple of weeks, he was nicer. Then Christmas came. I was supposed to have dinner on Christmas Eve and go and see a movie with my dad and my sister. I had told Travis about this weeks before, and that morning, while I was getting ready, he was in the living room, snorting coke, popping pills, smoking weed, and pretty soon he started screaming at me, which I saw coming because that always happened when he was high. And so he was accusing me of running around, lying about seeing my family. Eventually, he was so high, he was accusing me of having an affair with my own father. And I got so tired of the screaming, I went in the bathroom and I shut the bathroom door and locked it, just trying to get away from the screaming. And I thought for some reason that he was gonna leave, he was gonna go drive, take a walk, whatever he needed to do. But he didn't, and soon he started banging on the bathroom door, pounding on it, and then throwing his whole body against it, trying to break it down. And I remember hearing a loud crack, and the door busted open. And I'll never forget that look in his eyes. Really dark, really cold, and I've never been that scared probably in my life. And he drew his hand back, and then he hit me as hard as he could in the face, and he just kept hitting me, and I fell to the ground, and I remember him reaching down and yanking my arm, yelling at me to get up, and he picked me up, threw me against the corner of a wall, and I felt my ribs crack. And I fell on the ground, and he just kept hitting and kicking me, and I couldn't breathe, and I lay there on the floor thinking that this was it, that I was gonna die and he was gonna kill me. And eventually, he stopped hitting me. He got a cloth and he wetted it, and he started wiping my face and cleaning me off. And he told me that if I loved him, I wouldn't do something like this again, that I would do anything for him. You know, didn't I see that he did everything for me? And I owed him. And so deep into his addiction and my addiction, that's what ran our entire lives. The first time I prostituted myself, I was really full of justification to myself. He had owed some money to some dealers, and he told me that if we didn't do this, that they would come after him, that they would hurt him, that they would kill him. And the guy wanted me. And so if I slept with him, then it would be okay. And I remember not wanting to do it, but feeling like I had to save him. And I didn't really understand why he wanted me to do it, because of all the times he had accused me of cheating, he still was asking me to do this. But in his mind, it was okay because he was in control of the situation. And he told me, oh, baby, it's just gonna be this once. Don't worry about it. It's just gonna be this once, and then we'll be set. Which, of course, it was not just that once. After the first time, it became a really regular thing, trading my body for drugs for him and for I. And I remember I didn't really think of it as prostitution. I thought of it as trading or compromising or a business deal. That wasn't prostitution. I was just trading my body for drugs, to get my fix. Plus that I already thought I owed him. So he would arrange my dates, and then I would go, he would take me, wait, and then take me home. And he would immediately take the money or the drugs, giving me my fix when it suited him. We would buy larger amounts of drugs with some of the money, and we would make even more money. And I remember he kept the money in this giant glass container in the kitchen, to where I could see all the money, all these bills stuffed into this glass container, but he knew every dime that was in there. And had I touched that, I would be beaten. And so it was always taunting me, I had earned that money, but he was still getting it. And whenever we would deal, he would be the one to send me to meet the buyer. And one day, I was running drugs for a buyer, and I saw a cop. And I knew what was about to happen before it actually happened. We were at a four-way stop, and I looked at the cop, and the cop looked at me, and I wasn't doing anything illegal besides carrying drugs at the time. And I proceeded slowly through the stop sign, and his head just went like this, watching me, and I knew what was about to happen. That police officer pulled forward, pulled a U-turn, turned his lights on, and pulled me over. And he came up to the window, he's like, "Are you Samantha Weakley?" And I was like, "What? What? Why would you say that? Why are you asking me? Why'd you pull me over? I wasn't doing anything illegal." And he kept asking me, "Are you Samantha Weakley?" And I, of course, was being quite disagreeable. And so gets on his radio's for backup. That's when I'm like, "Oh no, I'm Samantha Weakley." And so backup arrives, and they're placing me in handcuffs while they're searching my car. And as it turns out, I had a speeding ticket that was way past due, and it was I hadn't had insurance, my tags were expired, I was speeding at the time, and so I had a warrant out because I had an unpaid ticket, and the police officer recognized my car. So when they searched my car, I had been only being arrested for a warrant until they searched my car. Then I was arrested with intent to sell, paraphernalia, and resisting arrest. They took me into booking. I got a lawyer, and the lawyer flat out told me, "You're gonna do some time." So I agreed to make a plea deal, and I only did 3 months in county with the exchange of a plea for guilty, and they'd knock it to a class 1 misdemeanor. When I was in jail, that's what it took for me to hit my rock bottom. Travis had disappeared. All my friends that I thought I had, they didn't contact me. And I realized how bad my life had become. Detoxing in jail is a really terrible process. It's really painful. And but worse than the physical pain of detoxing, the emptiness that I felt was excruciating. Everything that I had tried to fill that emptiness with, drugs, sex, men, all the emptiness was still there, and it had gotten bigger. My sister had given her life to Christ years before and was always writing me cards, sending me little verses, sending me little encouragements, and I'd always skipped over the verses before, but now I had some time on my hands. So I looked over the verses. And in 1 Corinthians, it says, 1 Corinthians 2, 9 through 11, it says, "No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. But God has revealed it to us by his Spirit." And I feel like I finally saw how desperate I was for God, for something to pull me out of this darkness, out of this emptiness, and to be filled again. And it was there that I made the best decision of my life, and that was to give my life to Christ. And when I got out of jail, I was determined to stay clean and sober and to start fresh. And I knew I couldn't do that in Kansas City, that I would end up going back. So I'd always wanted to go to Ireland. So I took what money I had, booked a plane ticket, and left for Ireland. And I had gotten accepted to a college in Ireland, so I was going to start fresh. And within the first 2 months of my being in Ireland, I met Liam. And Liam was a born-again Christian. His family was born-again Christians, and they were just so awesome. They took me in as part of their own. I lived about 2 hours away from where they lived, so every weekend I would go up. His mom would feed me. We would go to church together. I would get to volunteer. And their family was something that I had always longed for. Parents that respected and loved each other, the closeness, the intimacy. and I really finally felt at home, and that was regardless of my past. I loved going to church with them and volunteering, and it wasn't long before Liam and I fell in love. And he was the man that I had always dreamed of. A handsome Irish guy, dark curly hair, light blue eyes. He was a musician, and I would go to his gigs, and he would smile at me from the stage and dedicate songs to me. He bought me flowers and made me dinner, and our relationship was pure and centered in Christ. He asked me to marry him just before Christmas of 2008. Really soon after that, we started having sex. Again, it was much like my first time, full of justification of that we were gonna get married anyway. It's okay, it's just a few months. Like, I love him, he loves me, we're gonna be married anyway. In March of 2009, 3 months before our wedding, I found out I was pregnant. I was terrified, and so was he. His parents were born-again Christians. We didn't want to tell them. We were scared that he was going to be disowned, that his parents wouldn't love me anymore, that the church would kick us out. And so we made a really stupid decision out of fear. And abortion is illegal in Ireland, so we booked a flight to Manchester, and I had my second abortion. And I remember I almost backed out that day, and I didn't. And I came out of the room, and he was there, and we both just broke out into tears. And we felt so guilty, but we never talked about it. We never turned to God. We never turned to any of our Christian friends or the people in our church for help, for prayer, for anything. And we just kind of suffered in silence. And of course, from that, our relationship soon dissipated because of our guilt. We lost our connection to each other, and 2 days before our wedding day, we called it off. And I remember for a long time, I felt so guilty. Like, how could God love me? He had saved me from all of these things from before, and I still messed up. Like, I still started having sex. I still had an abortion. Like, surely God wasn't gonna love me anymore. However, it took me coming to Las Vegas and doing a discipleship training school that they really poured into me and told me how God actually is. And God doesn't remember the things that I've done after I've repented and asked for forgiveness. In Hebrews 8:12, it says, "For I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more." And God is just so beautiful in that. And that even though I was carrying all of this guilt, I had thought all these things in my past had been my fault. And granted, I did make some pretty terrible decisions, but God was faithful to not only restore me, but to redeem me and to take all of the things that I had done and work them together for good. And with that, in January of 2014, I interviewed for Hookers for Jesus. I felt a calling on my life to work with girls that came out of similar situations to the one that I had come out of, all of the abuse, the abortions, the prostitution, the drugs. And I could be a testimony of God's glory to these girls. And to God's glory, I was blessed to get the job and work with Annie Lobert. And that's where I work today. And every day I see girls in the same kind of pain that I was in. But that's okay, because God is so much bigger than our pain. He is so much bigger than our sin. And God is the only one that can redeem me and redeem these women and redeem you. And I know that he's going to do that. So, thank you.